All right, what's going on? Today I'm going to show you how to get around the 10,000 character custom code limit in Webflow natively. Matt Evans, my boy over in Ireland, is having some troubles with an SVG. This will apply pretty much just to SVGs. I'll show you what we've got. My original theory was to make a network call, get it as HTML, parse it, and then drop it onto the page. But we can actually store it in the Webflow CMS, and I will show you how to do that right after this.
Hey there, Webbay.
Here's the little demo project. I've got a CMS with 4 items in it called clients, and we can click each one and it'll load. And you see I've got the SVG coming in here, and it's grabbing this color that is stored in the CMS. If I go back and go over to Vita Hessel here, you can see we've got the SVG here and the color has changed. And this SVG is one I'm grabbing right here. This is from my GitHub, but if you grabbed it, say from Figma, you would just right click and click copy paste as SVG. So copy as SVG. And then let's go back to the browser. And if I go to a character counter and I paste this in here, we can see this thing is 36,411 characters. So we can actually trim that down to start out by going to SVG OMG, and we'll paste it here. And look, it's already saved 68 to 69% of the size on this thing. So let's just copy it and paste it back into character counter and see what we get. Now it's 25,000. Okay, and you can see an SVG actually behaves a lot like an HTML document, so it's pretty much markup, but you can assign it fields and classes, and there's different versions of SVG. So you might want to be careful with this. This is just the one that I pulled off Figma, so let's make sure that it works. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to show you the Webflow project here. So this is the template page, and you can see we don't even see our SVG here, but that's okay. Let's look at the CMS first. In the CMS, I have clients, and that has 4 items. And each client has, a logo. A lot of this stuff I'm not even using, some placeholder text. The 2 that I added are down here, the color. So you want to assign a color to the client or whatever CMS item you're using, and then SVG as rich text. So this is a rich text field, and normally you would want to just come down here and say plus and code and add some code, but you'll see Webflow's not letting me save. And it takes a second, but it's probably reading it or something, trying to figure out exactly what's going on. But I can't actually save this because you'll get a red message up here sometimes, like Matt showed the screenshot of, that you've exceeded the 10,000 character limit. So I mean, even if I just subtracted some of these, will it ever let me save, even if it's invalid SVG? Nope, it's not telling me. Anyways, we know it's not going to work. You'll run into the problem. So let's abandon this and discard that. And we'll delete the embed, and we're just going to paste this as plain text or rich text or whatever it is. I'm not worrying about formatting or anything because I'm going to use the DOMParser to parse this as an image. So we'll go ahead and save this. And I have in each one the SVG. You could actually just load this directly on the page, but as a rich text element. But I wanted to include it in the CMS just for fun. Hey, a quick little note that I found is that copy pasting from SVG OMG actually does not work as well as straight from Figma. So what I would recommend doing is coming into Figma, right click, copy paste as SVG, then come back to your Webflow project and just paste that directly. Now we want this thing to be responsive, so I'm going to set the width equal to 100%, and then I'll just delete the height value here, and I'll let the box that I'm going to put it in control the size. So if I save this, this is exactly what I want, copying from Figma, come out of the CMS, and then I have this SVG placeholder where I can set the width here, like say I want it to be 37 and publish that. And we'll see it takes up 37 rem. So now if I brought this down to something like, 15. Okay. Then it's going to be smaller. This is just something I noticed right before I was publishing. I wanted to make sure that I showed you the best workflow for the SVG. So definitely recommend Figma. Illustrator might work too, but the code I was getting from SVG OMG actually was causing a couple errors. So be on the lookout for that. So we'll come back here and let's look at the template page itself. Now, just so you can see the color I have as a background color on this link block from the CMS, that color. And then if I pop into Navigator here, so let's zoom in. I've got, come up here. I have data holder. This has SVG as rich text and color. These are both connected to the CMS. Grabbing the elements from our CMS. I'll make them unhidden in just a second. And then we have our section, padding, container, padding vertical, link, heading, SVG placeholder. This is the other important one. This is where we're going to append the SVG once we read it in from rich text and parse it to the right format that we need. So I'm going to zoom out And I'll go ahead and hit data holder here and unhide this so you can see what I've got going on. So you can see it's just pulling in as rich text all of our SVG here. And then at the bottom, I have this color. This is just a text div. And then I've set the background color to get from the clients in CMS. So I'll hide that back again now. And we'll go ahead and publish. And now if we check out our page, we notice we can't see that stuff that we put in that's hidden. So, if I go into data holder, it's indeed there. It's on the page. It's just not rendering because we've made the wrapper div data holder hidden, but everything else is there. And now the plan of attack we're going to have here is we're going to get this SVG as rich text. We're going to parse it into the image like I've already said, and then we're going to drop it into that SVG container div that we got. So let's hop into the code and see how we're actually going to build this. The very first thing I want to do is get references to all the elements on our page that we need in order to provide the functionality with JavaScript that we want to do. So let's define a constant. We'll call it color we want to replace. And in this instance, if we look at my original SVG, there's this light blue color on the shirts of these two people. And then there's also a darker blue on the boots, and I'll show you how to change that at the end of the video. So this RGB 48172.209 is the light blue color that's on the people's shirts. Then we want to select the elements on the page that we need by their attributes. So we have SVG is rich text, SVG container, and color. And let's go back to the Webflow because I didn't actually show you this. But within our data holder, I have SVG is rich text. If I hit the gear icon over here, you can see I have this custom attribute, WB element equals SVG is rich text. And then if I look at color, I have one WB element equals color data. And then if I go to not the rich text blocks, the SVG placeholder div, I have WB element equals SVG container. Okay, so we've selected the elements that we need. Now we're ready to perform some logic. The very first thing we want to do is parse the SVG as rich text to a MIME type of image/SVG plus XML. How do I know how to do this? Well, turns out in the docs, there's this thing called DOMParser, or the DOMParser API that all browsers are able to do. And we can call this method parse from string that exists on the DOMParser object, pass it a string, which in this case will be the SVG as a string, and then a MIME type. And one of the MIME types that's available here is image/SVG plus XML. Now, I don't know if you've ever run into this MIME type thing, but anytime I'm working with computers and I get errors about MIME type, I've always been pulling my hair out, but we're not going to pull out our hair today. So back to code sandbox. We're going to say parser equals new DOMParser, and that's just instantiating a new instance of the DOMParser object. And then we're going to create a variable called SVG document, and we're calling that parse from string method. And that gets two parameters, remember. First, it gets the string that we want to pass it. So in this case, we're calling SVG as rich text, which we selected up here, and we're getting the content within that. So that's just going to pass all that SVG info as text. And then we're going to tell it, parse from string, that we want it to parse to this MIME type. Again, MIME types are scary, but we're going to move forward here. Next, we want to select the SVG element from the newly created doc. So this is going to save as like an HTML looking thing. Let's go ahead and console log what SVG doc looks like. Document, save that and refresh. And let me zoom in on my console here so you can actually see what's going on. You can see, okay, this thing's got a document and it's got all these properties and stuff. And so what do we actually do with this though? Well, we want to access the SVG that's stored in there. So let me just get rid of this console log. We don't need that. Then we'll get our SVG image by calling query selector on SVG document that we just got up here. And we're going to look for an SVG element. So we just pass in the string SVG. So now we have our SVG image, and we're just going to append that to our container. So we can call SVG container.append SVG image. So let's save and come back here and refresh. And boom, we're getting our SVG now. But the colors haven't changed yet. But that's pretty cool. Like, we just defeated the 10,000 character custom code limit for SVGs in Webflow natively by storing it in the CMS there. So I think that's pretty cool. Every time I've done this before, I've done a network call, a fetch request to get it, but this time we can just leave it right in our CMS. Now let's go ahead and look at an SVG. So I'm going to just open this up here and grab this little inspector icon up here, and we can see, okay, SVG actually has all these different things that we can select. I can select the face, I can select the shirt here, and we know that these these are all paths within our SVG. So if I scroll up, scroll up, scroll up, more than 10,000 characters, scroll up. Okay, we've got SVG. There's a tag of SVG. This G stands for group. So whatever our SVG software is using is grouping these things together. And then within the group, we have paths. And we can see each path has a different fill color. Now, depending on the SVG software you use, these might actually have classes assigned to them, like ST1, ST2, you'll see with Illustrator. But in this case, this is what we got from Figma, so we're going to move forward with this. So what we want to do is we want to select every path that has that certain fill. And now it's being computed as a hex color. And remember, I got that, we got the RBG. Anyways, so we want to find the path that has the color that we're looking for. So back to the inspector icon, boom, path, it's this fill of 30ACD1. So I'll copy that. And let's just go to Google and say this as RGB. And of course, the first one will convert it to us. So we see it's 48,172,209. And that is how I arrived at this color we want to replace up here, 48,172,209. Okay, so we need to select all the paths within the SVG. So we can just say SVG image.querySelector all, the path element. So that's for one. Now we want to loop through all of those, and we want to check if that path is the color that we want to replace, then we'll replace it. If not, then we'll do nothing. So for each gets a function right here, and it gets a variable of path. So this is going to be each individual path, and we can check if that's a match. So to do that, we'll call this a function that lives within the browser window called getComputedStyle. We'll pass it our path, and then we'll get the dot fill. And the reason I used RGB is because this is going to give us an RGB value. I can show you that real quick. If I come to the browser and this path here, so let's say I'm going to store this as a global variable. And when I do that, down in my console, I get temp1 here, and that's that path element. But I can say get computed style of temp1, and you can see it's got all these CSS declarations in here. But now I'm going to say dot fill, and oh, okay, now it's giving me a string of an RGB value. It's not giving me the hex, which is kind of funky because in the parsed HTML, it's showing up as a hex, but that's what getComputedStyle gives us. Anyways, let's carry on. So now we know our getComputedStyle path.fill is equal to the color that we want to replace. So let's go ahead and replace it. So on our path, we will get the style and we'll get the fill, and we'll set it to color.style.background color. You remember color came from way up here above where we were selecting our elements. I like to group all my selectors together, so they're all the way up here. And then we just set the path style fill to the color style background color. And if I save this and refresh, now we can see we're replacing the color. So if we wanted to do it for the dark blue boots as well, all I would do is select this. Okay, I get the hex code, come into Google or this website that is just awful, has all this stuff going on. And this is the RGB value we want. So I'm copying that. Come back to the code, and let's say const color. I'll just call it color2 for now. Wrap it in quotes and put the RGB right at the front. And we can say, we'll just copy this if statement here, bring it down below. So if the fill equals color2, then we'll just replace it with the same color. But I've saved. I'm going to come back here and refresh, and it doesn't work. Oh no, what did we do? Equals color2. Refresh. Come on, come on. No. Let's go ahead and store this as a global variable. And we will say get computed style of temp2 dot fill. Not defined. Oh, temp1. Temp1 dot fill. So it's 39, 138, 168. I'm wondering if this is the same. Yeah, it is. So oh, I didn't put spaces. Good to know. So we need to have these spaces here because we're checking that it's a string exactly equal to. So save. And now if we come back and refresh, okay, our blue boots have turned orange. Hey, if this helped you, I think it's a pretty cool little hack, then go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Check out Matt Evans. He's always coming up with good questions about Webflow. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.